Hey guys, Miguel Gomez here with Low Tech, and today we're reviewing the OnePlus Nord. Let's get started. Okay guys, so let's dive right into the review, and I've been using the OnePlus kind of as a daily driver here in Arizona, and I did run into some problems using a Verizon SIM card. So the SIM card would send and receive phone calls, but only send messages. It didn't receive any messages whatsoever, no matter how many times I tried clearing cache or just following all the troubleshooting guides that there is online. Also, the data wasn't working at first until I changed the APN name into something else. So I just went to a store and got an AT&T SIM card. I wanted a T-Mobile card to try out 5G and see if I could get it to work here in the States, but that just didn't work out. Anyway, with the AT&T SIM card, I got decent data speeds, nothing like mind-blowing, and the phone calls and all that seemed very good and very consistent, not like above average, but definitely not below average either. For phone calls, I only had one time speaking with my brother that the call quality was really good, and then for a few seconds it went really bad. It was hard for him to hear me. The more annoying thing was it would randomly cut like data off for some reason. Like, it would still have bars, but it would say mobile carrier has disabled data for some reason, and that was really annoying. It didn't happen too frequently, maybe like once or twice, but it is something to note. And another thing, I took it to Las Vegas to try out in a more urban environment. So specifically with AT&T, it was having trouble hopping towers. So like driving down the road and just browsing the internet, it would suddenly lose signal, and then a few seconds later it would pick back up. So it was like it was hopping around the towers, but not really being able to receive or send any data in between those towers, even though most phones are really good at that now. So I don't know if this is like an AT&T issue. I don't think it is, because my brother has an AT&T SIM card and it didn't do it so on his phone, but with the Nord it did. So that is something to note. It's not like a huge deal breaker, especially because the Nord isn't really coming to the US just yet, so they still have a lot of time to figure out the kinks and bugs. One of the things I really love about the Nord is the screen. It has the 90 Hz fluid display. It's an AMOLED 6.4 inch. The best thing about it is that it gets really bright, but also it has really good palm rejection. Something I really noticed, because I have smaller hands, but like when I'm trying to reach something, like my palm is touching the keyboard, but it doesn't click the keyboard with my palm. Something that my Galaxy S10 doesn't do as well as this. So the only downside about the screen to me is the camera punch, because it has two cameras in there, an ultra wide and a normal one, and honestly I don't see the point of the normal selfie camera. I'd rather just have the ultra wide. It just looks pretty much the same, but that's what people want nowadays, is that ultra wide selfie camera, and I just want the hole punch to be a little bit smaller. I don't mind the single camera cutout on my S10, but the dual camera cutout does get in the way more of like viewing videos, or you just notice it more. You're definitely getting a lot more screen real estate with the Nord, and a really good screen at that. To me, something else I really loved about the Nord screen is the inbuilt fingerprint sensor that you just put your finger down there and it scans like magic pretty much, and to me that just feels so much more natural than having your fingerprint on the side or on the back, and it just works. Sometimes if like your finger is dirty, like any other fingerprint sensor, it's not gonna like accept it immediately, but to me it's fast enough and doesn't really delay you using your phone that much. I think the camera's actually really good for the price. The only thing with the cameras is the macro just kind of looks a bit soft. There's nothing too special about it. It's more of a gimmick and like a buying point than like a real feature to me. So that's just something I thought about. And the selfie cameras are actually pretty good too, but I noticed in Snapchat they get really blurry. It's like they're not auto-focusing, so you can hold the phone right there. In the camera app, it looks great, but when you open Snapchat, it just looks really blurry. So there's definitely some optimization, and that's probably on the Snapchat side of the drivers and stuff for the camera. But apart from that, it looks really good. And again, for a $400 phone, you don't really see much of a difference between that and a $600 phone, which is the S10e. So here are two pretty similar fixtures. This one I took with the OnePlus Nord, and this one I took with the S10e. And as you can see, they're not too far apart in terms of quality. The Samsung is a tad sharper and definitely a bit more saturated, but that's just Samsung colors. The OnePlus looks really good as well. It's just a bit less saturated and a bit less detail overall. So let's talk about the specs real quick. It has a Snapdragon 765, and honestly, I didn't notice a huge difference between the Snapdragon 765 in this and the Snapdragon 855 in my S10, because as you can see from the benchmarks, the 855 is much better in pretty much everything, and especially in gaming. But as you can see, the gaming performance on this thing is really good. There's nothing like, wow, this is such a cheap phone. Like, it's so slow, it's so not smooth. And that's something that's actually part of the Nord's paperwork, is like, do specs really matter if the experience is smooth? And they really don't, because it doesn't matter if you have the latest end hardware with really crappy software or really heavy software that makes it slower. It's better to have a mid-range processor and really clean, easy to use software to make up for it and make the whole experience a lot smoother and a lot better for the end user. So another good thing about the Snapdragon 765 that's in here is that it really doesn't get too warm, or I guess the Nord just handles the thermals very well, because the phone doesn't get very warm to hold. I know it's because it has a plastic band instead of a metal band around it, but like even the glass doesn't get that warm to the touch. So like when you're playing games or warp charging, it doesn't really feel uncomfortable to hold. Your hands don't get as sweaty as you do with like a phone that has metal and more, I guess, a thinner back. I don't know, but it feels really good in the hand, especially when like after long gaming sessions, you're not like sweating profusely or it becomes uncomfortable to hold because it's so hot. So I think that's a really good mark for the Nord, and I actually prefer this like to hold and charge and play games with this phone compared to my Galaxy S10, because my S10 has the metal band and it gets really quite warm, especially after all the benchmarks and all the gaming I did to compare the two. Is this got a lot more uncomfortable to hold than the Nord did. So to me, the build quality and the design of the Nord is really good. I love the blue marble look, and even though it's a plastic and glass phone, it feels very solid and it doesn't feel cheap or insignificant in the hand, unlike the Pixel 4a, which feels, it's a plastic fantastic, but this feels a lot more substantial. And the only thing about the design that I don't love is the lack of headphone port. That's not like a huge deal breaker nowadays, especially because the OnePlus Buds come in at a pretty reasonable price. But for me, I love wired headphones. Like, wireless earbuds will never replace a wired set for me because of the sound quality difference. But for the most part, it's fine, and most people can live without a headphone port. Another thing about the design, it has this knurling on a rocker switch or a sliding switch that controls the volume. So it turns on the volume, vibrate, or silent, and I really like that. It reminds me more of like an Apple type thing, and not a lot of Android phones have that, but I use it all the time. Also, since it is glass front and back, you'd think it's a fingerprint magnet, and it really isn't. Like my Samsung S10 has a lot more fingerprint attracting qualities to it compared to the OnePlus Nord, and I just like how the Nord feels and looks a lot. So that might sound a bit biased, but it's true. Okay, so one of my favorite features about the OnePlus Nord is warp charging. It just works super well, and honestly it's a game changer for me, because even like 18-watt fast charging feels slow compared to warp charging. Like if you forget to charge your phone overnight and like you just plug it in, take a shower, come back out, and it's like at 70%, that's like a game changer, because you don't have to have your phone tethered to the wall all the time. And it also helps that the battery life is pretty good. I'm averaging between 5.5, 6 hours of screen on time. With more heavy use like Google Maps or just gaming, it's more like closer to 4.5, 5, but that's pretty normal. And that is running the screen at the full 90 Hertz, not 60 Hertz, because you can turn it down to save battery life. So some bugs also with multitasking is like you swipe up or you hold up to multitask and like it kind of glitches like a few apps back and then comes back. It happens pretty rarely, but it is like a small bug that they have in the multitasking on the Nord. And overall, I just think the Nord is a really great value for money, and if this does come to the United States for around $400 or $450, I think it'll be a standout and really put a lot of pressure on Apple and even Google, even though they just released the Pixel 4a, which is a great value at $350. People will look at the Nord and be like, wow, that's so much more phone with the screen and like a little bit faster processor, that I think people would save up those $100 or $50 and go with the Nord, because people love big phones. And like one of my best friends really wants a Pixel 4a, but the 5.8-inch screen is just a little bit too small for him, and if it had a 6.5-inch screen like this does, he would go and buy one immediately, but it doesn't. So I think there's definitely a market in the $400 to $450 range here in the United States. And like as long as we can figure out the signal issues and the like SIM card issues, I just think that's regulatory stuff or some software things they need to do. But if they can get that figured out, this phone should definitely come here to the United States, and I think it'll sell really well. Thank you guys for watching. Catch you in the next one, where I'm gonna unbox and review the OnePlus Buds. Stay tuned for that.